Adjacent to Fargo, North Dakota, Moorhead is a busy spot on the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Moorhead Junction consists of the double-track KO subdivision, which is a part of the ex-Northern Pacific Main Line. This line is now a part of the BNSF's Northern Transcon that runs from Chicago to the Pacific Northwest. The other track is the Prosper Sub, which is a small segment of ex-Great Northern Track that connects to the KO Sub, as well as the Hillsboro Sub that runs north to Grand Forks and the Breckenridge Sub that runs south to Breckenridge, Minnesota. Nearly all the trains that operate through the junction pass through or terminate at the large yard in the neighboring town of Dilworth, which is just east of Moorhead. Shortline operator Otter Tail Valley operates a train from Fergus Falls, Minnesota, to interchange with the BNSF at Dilworth as well. We are set up just east of the junction for our first few trains. We are looking westward toward Fargo. The double-track main is the KO subdivision. The series of switches lead to the Prosper Sub heading north to yet another junction with the Hillsboro Sub to Grand Forks. The tracks heading south lead to the Breckenridge Sub. Also, just beyond our shot to the left is OTV Junction, which is the lead to the Otter Tail Valley's line to Fergus Falls. Unfortunately, the OTVR wasn't operating a train to Dilworth during our visit. However, you can see operations of Otter Tail Valley's entire line in C-Vision's video, Minnesota's Railroads, Volume 4. Our first train is a stack train heading east for a crew change in Dilworth. Many yard jobs and locals that are based at Dilworth Yard make their way through Moorhead Junction. Here, a local is coming off a track called the P-Line, where it just completed its work at the American Crystal Sugar Plant, which is just north of our location. The P-Line connects to the Prosper Sub just beyond the road overpass next to Moorhead Junction. This train will have to wait for 2 main line movements before it can head through the junction and on to Dilworth Yard. Several other yard jobs work the dozens of industries in the Fargo and West Fargo areas. The P-Line local has shoved onto the Prosper Sub and is now heading off the Prosper Sub through a connection onto the KO Sub. With a GP38 leading, the train is heading to Dilworth Yard. This train is one of few that still uses a caboose due to its many backup movements it must make. With the intensity of rail traffic through here, it is obvious that many rail fans like to take time to watch the exciting action at Moorhead Junction. This yard job is heading from Dilworth Yard to industries in Fargo and West Fargo, including Bush Agri-Resources and Cargill Industries, along with the steel and lumber industry. Two mainline trains meet each other at Moorhead Junction. This eastbound is led with two warbonnet painted locomotives, and the westbound is headed up by an ES-44 DC. We now relocate our camera next to the junction itself. Looking from the diamond, our camera pans left to see the Prosper Sub, which runs over Center Avenue, which is also U.S. Highway 10 and 75. In the next shot, the track in the foreground is the connecting track for trains coming from the south. Trains coming north for Dilworth Yard are forced to shove their train for a little over a mile to the yard since there is no eastbound connecting track. We will view a couple trains needing to perform this operation soon. Two ex-Santa Fe SD40-2s lead this westbound vehicle train into Dilworth Yard. An ex-GP30, now classified as a GP39M, is leading this light power to Switch Industries in West Fargo. A recently delivered ES-44 AC locomotive leads this empty coal train through the junction. A leased EMDX locomotive leads an ex-Santa Fe GP30 on the Jamestown local heading into Dilworth Yard. Coming off the Prosper sub over Center Avenue, an Oakway SD60 pulls a Grand Forks to Northtown train onto the KO sub. After a crew change in Dilworth, this train will continue onto the Staples sub from Dilworth to Northtown Yard in Minneapolis. As we take a peek at a lumber facility across the road, we wait for the Breck local coming from the south. This local, which originates in Breckenridge, Minnesota, is crossing the diamonds over the KO sub and will then shove its train onto the KO sub and into Dilworth Yard. This is another train that utilizes a caboose for its backup moves. After the Breck local clears, Grand Forks to Northtown's counterpart train Northtown to Grand Forks departs Dilworth Yard and heads to the switch leading the train onto the Prosper sub. A couple miles later, it will encounter the switch at Dakota Junction, where the train will head due north on the Hillsboro sub to Grand Forks. While the Grand Forks to Northtown train continues, the Dilworth Yard job with the 2140 heads back to the yard with a couple high, wide loads of Caterpillar equipment from Butler Machinery in Fargo. An SD-70 ACE, which was delivered to the BNSF in the spring of 2006, leads this coal train heading to Becker, Minnesota. Another yard job is coming off the Prosper Sub heading to Dilworth. This train, which is led with a GP38-2, includes an empty center beam, a few empty hoppers, and boxcars loaded with scrap paper that were loaded at Dakota Recycling in Fargo. A highball green is displayed for our last train, which is coming from the south. Another rebuilt GP30 heads a Lincoln, Nebraska to Dilworth Yard train onto the connecting track. This train is taking the connecting track onto the KO sub. Once it clears the connection, it will shove its train to Dilworth.